on a Saturday evening. So this is indicative of your dedication to advancing the cause of liberty in uber liberal Silicon Valley. Pardon? It's not coming through. Anyway, so tonight's class is being conducted by the Leadership Institute, Washington area, and the presenters tonight are going to be Israel Ortega. He's the editor of the website Libertad, which is the Spanish language website for the Heritage Foundation. And Paulo Sagaja, who is the director of coalitions at the Leadership Institute. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Paulo.
Thank you, Jerry. Can everyone hear me? I'll let you clap. Go ahead, continue clapping. I'm okay. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you very much for putting this together. It is extremely important, obviously, as we know here in California. A little bit about me. As Jerry noted, my name is Pablo Siva. I'm the Director of Coalitions with the Leadership Institute. I do encourage you to tweet. I don't know if you can see that up there, but maybe I'll make it a little bigger. Leadership Institute Twitter handle is LeadershipINST. Mine is Paulo Savaja. You can use the hashtag ITU, which stands for Issues That Unite. I'm from California. And you know, California gets a really bad rep throughout the rest of the nation. And whenever I'm somewhere else, I always usually say, yes, I'm from California, don't hold it against me. Or I say, yes, I'm from the former Golden State. Or yes, I'm from the land of fruits and nuts in more ways than one, as I'm sure you all can relate to here in the Bay Area. But I am a proud Californian. And you know, quite frankly, I think there's so much that we can do in this state to really move the ball forward and implement the right policies. No one has to tell us how bad things are in this state. Certainly, we don't have to remind ourselves of how bad things are in this state. But I'm extremely encouraged by your presence tonight. Why? Because it shows a willingness from you to do something about the current state of our state. And that, I think, is absolutely commendable. We're so happy to be here. Issues That Unite, essentially what we're going to discuss, Israel is going to discuss the topics of education and then the free market and how that essentially goes hand in hand with the Latino community, not just of anywhere else in the country, but specifically here in the state of California. I'll then turn around and talk a little bit about family and how we can connect with the Latino community via family, and then how to incorporate these three ways, these three topics. Number one being economic freedom, two, education choice, three being family. How to connect it, how to develop a message that actually resonates with the Latino community here in the state of California. So thank you very much, Jerry, and thank you, Howard, for setting it up here and everyone who's made this evening possible. I'm so excited to see almost every chair filled. I'm so excited to see everyone eating. This is great. I'm going to turn it over to Israel Ortega. As Jerry noted, he is the editor-in-chief of Libertad.org, which is the Heritage Foundation's Spanish website on all things good. Izzy does a lot of writing. In fact, Izzy and I were, as we call them, were on Univision. How many of you have ever heard of Univision? Okay, Univision late last year, I think it was October. It was the first time I've ever done a nationally televised interview, but I was wearing this same tie. So I said, you know what, I'm going to wear it here in the Bay Area, in San Jose. Hopefully it brings me good luck. I thought the interview went well, right, Izzy? So hopefully it brought us good luck, and clearly it did, because the room is full. So without any further ado, Izzy, if you could just please come on up here. He's going to talk to you about education and also economic freedom.
Great, well, thank you. Yes, happy to be here. Anytime that we can get away from the winter on the East Coast is always a good thing. Yeah, thank you for taking some time. I know this is Saturday night and you could be elsewhere. So what I'd like to do in the time I have with you is to really, I think it's going to be successful for me and for us, I think, if we can walk out of this room feeling encouraged. I think all of us in this room know that our ideas work, that our ideas are the right ones for the country. We know that in our hearts and our minds. But I think it's always good to be encouraged and to hear them again. And I think it's important as we look out and we know that, as Paulo was saying, that the economy's not doing as well as it can. We turn on the TV and we watch the mainstream media criticize our ideas. I think it's important that we remind ourselves again why it is that we are conservatives, why we believe in limited government, why we believe that individuals, not bureaucrats, are the way that we're going to get our country back on track. So the way I want to do this is I want to talk, as Paulo mentioned, one of the themes of the night, of course, is how do we bring Hispanics and conservatives together? And I certainly will do that, but I think, frankly, the ideas that we have as conservatives are ideas that are good for everyone. They're ideas that cut across racial, gender, ethnic gap. I mean, this is, we as conservatives believe not in equality of outcome, right? We believe in equality of opportunity, right? And we are convinced that this is a country that if you work hard, play by the rules, you can really take advantage of the opportunities. But what we're seeing from Washington, what we're seeing from folks in Congress is stifling innovation. It's limiting individual capacity and the ability for us to take advantage of the opportunities. And so what I want to do is really take on this issue that is being played out in Washington, and the president has been leading the charge on this, which is saying, you know, the rich are getting richer, there's the haves and the have-nots, the American dream is escaping from us. You can't make it in this country anymore without the federal government. Well, I want to take on that argument, and I want to show why the president and many of his allies in Congress are wrong, and show you. We can talk about other issues, but I want to talk specifically about two issues, which I think are really at the crux of how we provide opportunity in this country. And the two issues I want to focus on are economic freedom and educational freedom. I'm convinced, in this presentation, that I hopefully will do a good of a job to convince you that through economic freedom, we can have economic opportunities. And as President Ronald Reagan said it best, the best social program is a job. And I think all of us could agree with that. And so what I want to show is in these two issues, sort of what the left has done, how successful they've been. Spoiler alert, they have not, right? And then show how our ideas actually have been proven to work, and how they are actually lifting people out of poverty, how they are actually providing our youngest with a quality education. So, without further ado, let me do this PowerPoint, and I will confess, this is actually like the first PowerPoint, because I normally try not to overuse PowerPoint, but hopefully this will be a good tool, and it will be a good visual for some of the things I want to talk about. So, I just laid out what I'm sort of going to talk about in the next 30 minutes or so. Okay, so before we get started on the economic and educational freedom components, just want to take a really quick step to just talk briefly about the Hispanic population. I don't want to dwell too much about it because I think all of you living in California, I think, know that our country is changing demographically. As you can see from the map, a lot of the highest concentration of Hispanics in this country is in California. It's in the Southwest, in the East Coast, of course. You've got Florida, you've got New York, a few other states. I'm not going to get into the politics of this, but you know that there's a political component to this as well. But more than that, I think it's just good for us to have a frank discussion about the fact that the demographics in this country are changing, and more importantly than that, just what are the implications of that? What does that mean for our country? And what I want to do is point that out and really show that the left and their policies, particularly for Hispanics, but particularly for a lot of minority communities, has been actually devastating. There's a congressman who represents Idaho who said it best recently. He said, the policies of the Obama administration have been absolutely destructive to African American and Hispanic communities. And so I just, again, point this out just to show that the U.S. Hispanic population is big. And in this chart here, you can see that the U.S. Hispanic population is expected to grow. again, I'm showing this because I think it's important for us to also keep in mind what the future of our country is going to look like. These charts. By the way, this presentation, I'd be happy to email it to you. Be happy to share it with you. I know in the back you can't see the footnotes and the sources of this presentation, but I'd be happy to send it to you. Happy to talk with you as well after the presentation to talk more about anything I mentioned here, and happy to share with you my business card so we can talk. When I get back to Washington, if we want to talk more about this. So, again, this is just showing the population that is growing. Okay, economic crisis. As Paulo mentioned, you don't need a guy from Washington to tell you that the economy is not moving, right? We understand this. We know the jobs that were promised by this president are not being created. As you can see, the unemployment rate right now for the U.S. population is around 6.6%. The numbers came out yesterday by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and so we know that it's not moving well. As you can see, for the Hispanic community, it's about 8.5%. The California employment rate in December 2013 was 8.3%. For Hispanics, it was 9.1. Again, we know this. The economy is not picking up. Things are not going the way they should be. And I think this is where we now have to say, well, what has this next chart is again showing that, particularly in California, the economy is not improving as well as it should be. You guys know better than I do who's in charge in Sacramento. You know the governor and the policies that he's doing. Again, I'm bringing more of a national perspective of what's happening. Don't want to dwell too much on California specific, because you guys are a lot more experts than I am on this. Okay, so how has the left responded to the fact that the economy is not recovering? Well, this chart, I mean, this is just some of the bad ideas that they've thrown out there. But if you start from sort of the left to the right, I mean, it's stimulus spending. All of us remember when right after President Obama got elected into office, what was the one thing he said? You know, he said that he worked with Congress, he worked with the left in Congress to pass a massive stimulus bill. He said it was going to be absolutely fantastic for our economy. We're going to create jobs. Well, you know the story. That certainly didn't pan out. But that's the mentality of President Obama, of folks on the left. This is Keynesian economic thinking, that if you sort of spend more money, we're just going to get out of this recession. Right? That's their general thinking. Again, the unemployment rate has not gone down. Consumer confidence is at an all-time low. Even the stock market for a while was doing well. That's not growing either. What else? Subsidies. Well, you know, here again, what you're seeing is President Obama, what you're seeing Congress working with the president, providing subsidies for friends, for corporations even. This is the kind of stuff that the left is providing in terms of what's their response to fixing the economy and improving the economy. Of course, higher taxes. Instead of looking at ways of reduce the tax burden on all of us, the left has created and added more taxes. And so it's let's tax the rich, let's take more money. And what's absolutely fascinating about this conversation is that even if you were to basically take every single dollar of Bill Gates and the most wealthy Americans, that still wouldn't cover the $17 trillion deficit that we have as a country. And so this idea that we simply just need to tax the wealthy more, tax the rich more, that somehow that's going to solve everything, you and I know in this room that that's just populism. This is just stuff that makes for a good soundbite, but in terms of actually doing anything to reduce the deficit, to bring our economy back where it should be, that's just fantasy. Next thing, federal spending, and then this is again sort of the same idea by the president. If you watched the State of the Union a few weeks ago, it was painful to watch, right? But if you heard what the president said, a lot of it was just like, let's just spend more on transportation infrastructure. Let's build more roads. Let's, you know, and you know, you guys follow politics. You know a lot of this what that actually means. It means helping out specific congressmen, specific constituencies, and more than anything, that infrastructure spending is not the way we're going to actually grow the economy in a long-term sustainable way. The next two kind of big picture things: expanding the welfare state. For the president and for the left, it's how do we continue expanding the welfare state? How do we continue increasing the ability for folks not to look for work? I think all of us here recognize that it's probably a small role in terms of helping out our fellow American who's struggling, who can't find work. But what we're talking about now, when it comes to things like unemployment insurance, we're talking about almost 2 years. Folks can be on, receiving benefits for over 2 years. When it comes to government assistance, I don't know how many of you saw this report by Fox News a few months ago, but they were, unfortunately, this guy, the surfer guy, was in Southern California. I don't know if any of you saw this, but I see some hands. But so some of you already know what I'm going to say. But this guy was like a 25-year-old, able-bodied man who could work, and he basically has learned the game of system. And so he said, instead of working, instead of go look and find work, I just surf, drink beers with my buddies after work, and they showed him using the government assistance card and buying, I think it was a lobster or crabs or something with his money. And so this is an example. I mean, this is just obviously one bad apple, but this is I think representative of the fact that the president and his policies are making it a lot easier for folks not to look for work, to just depend on the government. And this next slide actually talks about sort of the dependence of the federal government. I mean, as you can see, this chart starts from 1962 all the way at the left. That ends in 2011, but you can see the growth of just a dependency, the number of Americans who are depending on the federal government. As you know, as a lot of you guys study history here, you know that in the 1960s, under the Great Society with LBJ and his ideas, that's when the growth of the federal government, the expansion of rights really started happening in terms of what the government had to do for folks. And so, I mean, this slide basically shows, how as the government has continued to expand and grow, you have more and more folks who are dependent on federal government. Healthcare, welfare benefits, housing benefits, rural and agricultural subsidies. At the bottom here, you can see some of the programs, right? Medicare, Medicaid, higher education, and besides that, even if you might say, well, let me stop this guy for a second. Maybe Social Security is a good program. We could have a discussion about that, but I think that the bigger point here is, are these programs being held accountable? Are we actually making sure that they're solvent? And the fact of the matter is that they're not. For a long time, the government has basically just put this in autopilot and just said, hey, let's keep this going, let's not rock the boat. And the fact of the matter is a lot of these programs are in danger right now of not being there for people who actually need them. And so this is the conversation that is not happening in Washington. Folks are choosing to run away from this discussion. There's no talk about entitlements. There's no talk about how do we actually reduce the amount of growth of government dependency. This is a conversation that unfortunately is not happening. And I'm glad that all of you here in this room care about the direction of our country, know that this is not sustainable, and our freedoms and our liberties really are at stake. And so this chart really shows it. Well, this next one is talking now about what are our ideas, what are we proposing. And again, I think sometimes, and I know I'm guilty of this too, sometimes, I sometimes may shy away from having this discussion. I grew up in New York. New York is not necessarily a bastion of conservatism. And sometimes talking to my buddies in New York, it's just like, how could you be a conservative? How could you promote these ideas? And I think again, it's important to hold firm, to remind ourselves that our ideas actually have been proven to work. That our ideas, when implemented correctly, actually do help create the jobs and opportunities that we frankly so desperately need in this country. So this sort of this diagram of sorts has some general ideas of what we stand for. And I think all of this, none of this is really going to be new to us as conservatives. We know this, we get this. But here, so we have let economic freedom create economic opportunity. I'm going to get into that economic freedom and kind of parse that out a little bit. I think all of us kind of get that in the room, but I just want to take a step further and kind of really explain what I mean by economic freedom. The next, making the private sector grow, right? We know here, particularly here in Silicon Valley, it's been entrepreneurs, it's been innovators in the tech field that have created those opportunities. It's providing the private sector the ability to grow. That's, as conservatives, as free market people, we understand that that's what really is going to create the jobs and opportunities that Americans need. It's not going to be creating more government jobs. It's not going to be creating more the bureaucracy in Washington to grow. Right, so that's one way to do it. Relieving tax burden. We know that if we start cutting taxes, that's going to have a positive impact on the purchasing power of individuals. It's going to allow them to save, to invest their money. I'll get to this in a second, but I mean, basically the concept of reducing taxes is trusting you to make decisions for yourself on how to use your money instead of handing over half your paycheck to the federal government. Reducing regulation. This is an important factor in terms of actually helping the economy to grow, helping to create those opportunities. If you start reducing the regulations when it comes to businesses, that's going to have a positive impact in terms of creating jobs and opportunities. And lastly, it's promoting civil society. And civil society, it really is the linchpin, I think, of what has made this country so successful and so powerful. Because if you think back at our founding fathers and you think about the folks who came to this country looking for religious freedom, there was an understanding that civil society really was important to how society was going to function. And civil society is our involvement in churches and faith-based organizations and organizations like these. And so this is an important concept of when we're being challenged to say, well, you just don't care about the poor, you don't care about people who are struggling. This is where I think we have an opportunity to come back and talk about the civil society and the role that plays. And I know Paulo is going to get to that in later in the presentation, so I don't want to steal his thunder. But I include that in there because I think it's important that as we talk about how do we respond to the economic crisis? How do we respond to the fact that so many of our fellow Americans are looking for work? I think it's important that we don't neglect the fact that the civil society, the charities, churches, faith-based organizations have a critical role in terms of how do we respond to the economic crisis that we're unfortunately living in. Okay, I think before I jump into the education, I just want to make sure that we understand that when it comes to the economy, when it comes to thinking about the crisis, the left really hasn't done anything to actually reduce the unemployment. It hasn't done anything to get the economy back on track. And this is no longer this nonsense that this is Bush's fault. I think it's obvious to all of us that this is now President Obama, that this is something that this economy it's been under his watch, and it's the policies that he's put in place. It's his ideas that he has implemented since he's gotten into office that have only made the situation worse. And I think it's important that we recognize that the left has had their chance. The left has had plenty of time to put into action their ideas, and the results have been absolutely devastating for our country. I don't need to dwell too much on this because I know all of us in this room understand the impact of this law, but if we think about why our economy is not growing, why we're not creating jobs, the one word that comes out in my mind is Obamacare. Obamacare has been a jobs killer, and this is not just me from the Heritage Foundation telling you this, a conservative think tank. This is the Congressional Budget Office. This is even the left has said this. Well, when it comes to the Congressional Budget Office, you can't touch them. They're the gold standard when it comes to objectivity. Well, a week ago, and I know all of us, or a lot of us know about this, the Congressional Budget Office said that almost 2.5 million jobs are going to be lost because of Obamacare. Just think about it, 2.5 million jobs are going to be lost because of Obamacare. This is the president's signature legislative achievement. This is the achievement that the president campaigned so hard on, that he worked so tirelessly with liberals in Congress to get it passed. Well, this is the Congressional Budget Office, excuse me, who's saying that this is going to be a jobs killer. When you think about our ideas, when you think about the fact that our ideas actually work, and I don't think I included this in here, but the fact is that economic freedom creates economic opportunities. And what I wanted to show you is that the Wall Street Journal and the Heritage Foundation recently came out with an index of economic freedom. And we do this every year. We've actually done this for the last 20 years. And what I wanted to show you was a graph of basically showing that the US, our score has been declining during the last 7 years consecutively. We've actually gotten out of the top 10 when it comes to this index, and we're now in number 12. So Canada's beating us. A lot of other countries are beating us. Frankly, it's unacceptable, because when I think about our country, I think about the fact that we really are the creators of economic freedom. And economic freedom, again, really just means that the government entrusts the individual the capacity to keep more of his earnings. It entrusts the individual to innovate, to create businesses. One of the things that we look at with the Wall Street Journal is, for example, how quickly can you start a business in your country? What are the fees that are involved when it comes to starting a business? Think about that here in California, for example. How long would it take? I see some people shaking their head, and it breaks my heart, because I know it's true that in a lot of states in our country, it is awful. It is awful to think about the paperwork, the regulations that you need to put up with to start a business. Let alone the tax burden on our country. Think about this: we have the highest corporate tax rate in the country. In the world. I mean, highest corporate tax rate in the world. We're beating countries like France and our friends in Europe when it comes to these tax burdens. 35% tax burden. One of the reasons why we didn't do so well in this index of economic freedom. And again, for objectivity, just so you don't say this is some guy from Washington who's just rattling numbers and citing just conservative outlets. The fact is that the Wall Street Journal, which is a very well respectable publication who has worked with us with this study, looked at one of the reasons why Canada is beating us in this index of economic freedom, and it has to do with the fact that their corporate tax structure has been significantly reduced since Prime Minister Harper came into office. And so that's going to attract jobs, it's going to attract opportunities for investors. The other thing I'll just mention, and this is also going to be, I think, a factor that is going to go against us in the index of economic freedom, not just this year, but years to come. It's been the fact that this president has been dragging his feet when it comes to the Keystone Pipeline. This is an opportunity. I think all of us are familiar with this Keystone Pipeline that would create at least, there's some estimates between at least 40,000 to 400,000 jobs. I don't know how many of you saw the Bill O'Reilly interview with President Obama during the Super Bowl, but I mean, it's this dismissiveness of the president, just basically saying like, well, we're not so sure if those jobs are going to be created. I mean, just think about that. I mean, we have Americans who are struggling to find work, who are waking up in the morning and not sure, how are they going to pay bills, and we have a president who is being so dismissive and saying, even if these jobs are created, I'm not sure it's worth pursuing it. This is the kind of stuff that really should fire us up, and I think should motivate us to get involved. And so, again, if the country is not moving in a direction that it should, it really is, because let's think about who's in office. Let's think about who the president is working with, Harry Reid and others in the US Senate who are making it very difficult for our ideas to be implemented, our ideas to work. The ideas I mentioned about reducing the tax burden, about making it easier for the entrepreneur, making it easier for the investor to invest. You have countries around the world that are actually benefiting from these ideas. Index of Economic Freedom, if you go to heritage.org and you just type in Index of Economic Freedom, you can do a fascinating thing where you can actually, you type in like the US and you compare the US with, say Canada or US and Mexico, and you can kind of see the thing. But one of the fascinating things about this index, it shows that you don't have to be a resource-rich country to do well in this index. Two countries that stand out in my mind that are doing really well in this index, South Korea and Chile. South Korea and Chile, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, were countries that were not doing very well, right? Countries that were not doing very well. A lot of children malnourished, infant mortality rates were high, literacy rates. Anyway, you know the story. It was just a bad place in these countries. Well, because of the free market, because of the ideas I just mentioned about economic freedom, about making it easier for the investor to grow, implementing free market ideas, these countries, South Korea and Chile, not only are doing well in the index, but just you as knowledgeable people know that these countries are growing, that they actually are creating middle-class jobs, or have a middle-class and even upper middle-class citizens. And so I just want to remind ourselves that when we hear the left and you open up the newspaper and you read these opinion columns that are saying, well, if we had just spent more money on the stimulus, things would have gotten better. Just remind ourselves, those ideas have been proven systematically not to work. Our ideas, on the other hand, are doing the complete opposite. Unfortunately for us, these ideas are being seen and implemented successfully outside of the US. The next section I want to jump into before I get the hook is the education crisis. Again, this is a big theme of the president. He said this before in his State of the Union address. He's talked about, well, one of the best ways that we're going to ensure that our country is successful, that we're going to be leaders of tomorrow, is by providing every quality child with an education. Right? We've heard this before, and I think all of us here in this room, in fact, if there's one thing that probably can unite us and progressives and liberals, is that we probably would agree with the fact that education is one of the keys to do well in this country, take advantage of opportunities, right? But that's probably where we would stop in agreement, because from there, we would then think about, well, how do we actually do this? And what happens when you recognize the fact that we are living in an educational crisis? I'll point out the Hispanic education crisis, but really this is happening for the entire country. Our education system is not serving us well. Again, if you look at, and I didn't include this in this PowerPoint, but there's another sobering and depressing statistic which is showing that our math and reading scores, our children's math and reading scores, compared to other countries' math and reading scores, we're doing terrible. Absolutely terrible. I didn't include this statistic in there, but we know that this is happening. I'm pointing out the Hispanic education crisis because I've written a lot about this and feel like I know some stuff about this, but I just want to point out again the fact that for all the president's oratory and all the president's promises about helping the education system, I just want to point this out and show you that this is not working. This is according to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Now again, Bill and Melinda Gates, these are not necessarily conservative Tea Party folks, right? They've come up with a study that has basically concluded that roughly half of the Hispanic students enrolled in some of our country's biggest cities, these are public schools, are essentially not getting a high school diploma. This is 50%, so just 1 out of every 2 Hispanics that are enrolled in public high schools in this country won't get a high school diploma. I mean, just think about that, how devastating that is. One of the things that we've done at the Heritage Foundation is actually kind of assess, well, what does that mean if you don't have a high school diploma? And this is just looking at statistics. This is not looking at even by gender, by demographic or ethnicity information. It's just saying if you don't have a high school diploma, there are a couple of things. There are a few things that most likely will happen to you in your lifetime, right? First, it's likely that you will have prolonged periods of unemployment. It's likely that in your lifetime you will go through long periods of unemployment. Second thing that we've concluded in looking at these numbers is if you don't have a basic high school diploma, it's likely that you will have prolonged periods of government dependency. You know, it's very likely that you're going to be collecting unemployment checks. You're going to be depending on some nutritional assistance programs. This is just, again, these are just characteristics. We've looked at data and studies of 20, 30 years of folks who don't finish high school. And the last characteristic, in fact, there probably are other characteristics, but the other characteristic that stands out in my mind is the fact that if you don't finish high school in this country, it's likely that at some point in your lifetime, you will be incarcerated, right? So again, these are just statistics, and I don't want to overburden you with statistics, but I think it's important that we just recognize that this is happening, that we are living in an educational crisis. Just as I mentioned, we're in an economic crisis. Well, we're in an educational crisis, and the reason why this matters is today's children, today's students should be, right, our future lawyers, our doctors, astronauts, whatever it is, you know. And so the fact that we have a system that is failing to prepare our children and students for tomorrow is a major indictment on the policies that are being implemented in Washington. I think I covered it in this slide. And again, I can mail this to you, and you can look at this further. But I don't want to overburden you and just overload you with more information. But let us just step back for a second and say, well, what has the left proposed? What is the left asking, or what is the left saying to this educational crisis? And really, it boils down to a few things. It actually boils down, there's like 6 things here, but I'll just tell you quickly 2 things that stand out to me what the left will respond to this educational crisis. They'll say, well, what we need is if we just spend more money, right, and we empower the government more, things will get better. Just promise us on it. Just take our word on this. If we just spend more money and we empower federal bureaucrats, things will get better. Sadly, I think some of us in this room are shaking our head and thinking that doesn't work. But sadly, for the last 40 years, essentially, a lot of Americans have really bought into that idea. They really bought onto that notion. And the other sad thing, it's not just Democrats. It's not just the left. It's not just liberals. A lot of conservatives, a lot of Republicans have actually bought into this idea too. You've seen a lot of this in different administrations. You've seen both parties essentially spending more money when it comes to education, but not just spending money on education. I think a lot of us recognize that investing in education is important, but it's spending money without actually trying to make sure that it's working. And the other thing that the left has been doing, which is educational crisis, has been simply empowering and governing and growing the control of federal bureaucrats when it comes to the decisions of our children and our students. We saw this in 2002 when, let me just finish this thought. When you saw President Bush, George W. Bush, right, work with the ultra-liberal Senator Ted Kennedy, right? Yeah, two guys basically come together, probably who were supposedly from 2 ends of the spectrum, who said that they could work on this education bill, which basically was handing over more control to federal bureaucrats, to federal employees. There's a question in the room about this point. Go ahead.
Actually, everything you're saying is wonderful.
Thank you.
Your presentation is spot
Oh,
on.
thanks.
What I need to know,
Yeah.
and I know the reason why I'm here,
Yeah.
is because I want to know as a responsible conservative
Yeah.
with free market and constitutional fundamentals.
Yeah.
How do I take those fundamentals to the
Yep,
community.
yep.
And give them what they need from an art
Yep.
perspective. I know what the
Yeah, yeah.
board has been doing.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Yeah, no, absolutely, no, absolutely. And I think a lot of it, yeah, and I think a lot of this, actually, I think Paolo is really going to pick up on this, because I think Paolo, what I'm really trying to do is provide the policy backbone, and I'm going to get to this Hispanic stuff particularly, but I think Paolo is going to really sort of be the cleanup hitter for me, and just kind of take these ideas and say, okay, in practical terms, in sort of day-to-day stuff, how do we take these ideas? But thank you for that thought and that question. So here it is. So it's just quickly for those folks in the back who can't see it. The responses to the left, it's more education spending, forcing Common Core, national standards, massive expansion of universal preschool, centralizing power. Well, here it is. So, again, the fact is that these ideas by the left have not worked. They haven't worked for all students, essentially, but particularly Hispanics, African Americans. For African Americans, the dropout rate is higher than the Hispanic population. It's about 70%. For Hispanics, about 50%. So again, what I want to do is, okay, these ideas by the left for Hispanics have not worked. This other chart just kind of underscores the fact that, so the bottom is showing sort of they're called NAEP scores, or it's not important, but it's sort of the way the government measures math and reading scores for children. That's the bottom, that's the horizontal line, right? What you see in the back, hopefully you can see it, but there's a blue kind of line. Do you see that? That's the money that the government has been spending on education. So you would think that, if you spend more money, or some would think, if you spend more money, that the scores would come up. But as you can see, the math and reading scores for children flatlined, just flatlined. It hasn't moved a dial. So next time you hear one of your liberal friends or family members say, well, we just got to spend more money on federal, on education. So this could be a good chart to say. By the way, roughly it's about $12,000 in DC, how much we're spending per pupil spending in the city, in our nation's capital. We have the highest dropout rate in the country. So again, just to kind of underscore that. Okay, so and hopefully I can answer now some of sort of that question about, okay, well, how do we respond to that? How do we, as conservatives, respond to the educational crisis? And I'll get to these hopefully one by one, but we've got things essentially empowering parents, not bureaucrats. We know that every child, every student is different. We have different needs. As individuals, we know we are different, right? And so the left treats everyone like one size fits all approach. I mean, this is why they have the Common Core, this is why they have the national standards, because for them it's just, everyone's the same, it's just one size fits all approach. And so what we are asking, we as conservatives are saying, is transparency, empowering parents, holding schools accountable, empowering parents through tax credits, educational opportunities, education savings account. This is a study, and I don't expect anyone to read it from cover to cover, although I may need to. This is called the Education Debit Card, and this was made by our friends at the Friedman Foundation, and all of us know about Dr. Friedman and the work he did when it comes to developing school choice and vouchers. Well, this is an extension of those ideas. An education savings account is being implemented at a very local level, but hopefully on a larger scale in the state of Arizona, not terribly far from here. And what they've come up with is this idea that if you were actually to give a parent a form of debit card, like a debit card like you would have in your wallet, but it would only be used for education funding. What would that do? What would that do to the system? And what we've learned, what we're finding out is that it does a tremendous amount in terms of giving the parent, the family, the purchasing power, the ability, the power to hold schools accountable, so that you can say, hey, this school is not doing well for me. I'm going to move and go somewhere else. This is revolutionizing the educational system in the state of Arizona. And just think about for a second, what if we could actually do that on a federal level? Just think about it for a second. You have a question? Yes.
No,
ma'am.
I have a question for
Yeah.
comment.
Yes.
The lady was far more polite than
Yeah.
I'm about to be.
Yeah.
You don't know your audience.
Yeah.
This is an audience that could probably quote verbatim
Okay.
everything you said so
Okay.
far.
Yeah.
We came because we really, really
Okay.
want to tie it together
Yeah.
to how can we reach a specific.
Yeah. Absolutely. No.
Wait, wait, I'm not
yeah.
done.
Okay.
Secondly,
Yeah.
I'm sitting really close.
Yeah.
Your PowerPoint
Yeah.
is almost worthless.
Okay.
It can't be read.
Yeah.
It's kind of the misuse of PowerPoint
Yeah.
as opposed to the effective use.
Yeah.
Please, for the sake of everyone, people are playing with their phones, they're falling
Yeah.
asleep.
Okay.
Respond to this audience.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. No. Yeah.
If I can make a comment. So what Izzy's here to talk about is the policy work. As he said, lay the groundwork for policy. And then what I come in and do is I talk about and explain how those policies, how we can use those policies and not talk about it the way conservatives normally talk about education policy. Conservatives normally talk about economic freedom because it doesn't connect with the Latino community. So yes, so I will be talking about that in about 15 minutes. And essentially we will make the connection between all these policies and how then you can take that and connect with the Hispanic community.
Gentlemen, you're losing your audience.
Okay. No, ma'am. Listen. I was going to end with this because I want to underscore the fact that if it's not obvious to anyone in this room, but I happen to be Hispanic. I happen to be an immigrant to this country. The ideas that I'm citing is not because I'm trying to show off and tell you that I know economics or not, and know education, because I know all of us in this room know about this. What I'm trying to basically just tell you is that our ideas are working, and they're working particularly when it comes to helping Hispanics. The reason why I mentioned Arizona is the fact that Arizona has one of the highest populations of Hispanics in this country. So when you think about, well, how do we, as conservatives, reach out to Hispanics? It's not rocket science. It's basically saying our ideas of the free market, of conservative ideas, help all Americans, regardless of race and ethnicity, particularly when our ideas are implemented correctly. So the reason why I was citing Arizona is because Arizona, a lot of Hispanic children, because of these ideas, are now finishing high school, are now going to be better prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. And so this is why I'm showing you this. This next slide is about the state of Florida. The state of Florida, again, has one of the highest populations of Hispanics in this country. What did Florida do to help its system? Well, it implemented a lot of the ideas that I've been talking about. It held teachers accountable. It empowered parents through school vouchers and tax credits. And what that's done, as you can see from this chart, is the Hispanic reading levels and math scores went dramatically up. In 1998, you see where they were. By the time in 2009, in that span, the scores improved. And so this is my point, that when our ideas are allowed to work, when our ideas can be implemented, our ideas can help all Americans, including Hispanics. And I wouldn't be here standing before you, talking with you, or have the opportunity to write for opinion papers, to newspapers, and go on TV and talk about these issues, had it not been for the fact that this country is a land of opportunity, that the ideas that we as conservatives have put in place can allow anyone from anywhere with virtually nothing to take advantage of this country through economic freedom, through economic opportunity that's created through it. On education, the president himself has said before that had it not been for the educational system that he got, he wouldn't be the president of the United States. And so what I hopefully got across to you is that our ideas help all Americans, and especially they especially help Hispanics. As I showed you on education, Hispanics are not doing well under this president. Hispanics are not getting a high school diploma. They're not completing school. When our ideas are allowed to work, when our ideas have the capacity to provide children with, and their parents with an opportunity to get a quality education, they work. And you talk to Hispanics in this country, and you poll Hispanics, you say, what is that one issue that you care about the most? One of the big things that they'll mention, if not the first or second issue, it's education. It's education, because they realize that in this country, if they can provide their children with an education, they can get ahead in life. And so I hope that I lay the groundwork in terms of showing you how on education, on economic freedom, we have the winning message. We have the policy bona fides to talk to Hispanics and say, this administration has been good to you. Our ideas can provide what you and your families, many of you, came here looking for. Thank you for your time.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, yes,
You spoke very well about the Arizona program.
yes.
And we are so blue here.
Yeah.
How in the world could we take that program? First of all, I don't completely understand what the program is.
Yeah.
How you said it was successful, but that's another issue.
Yeah.
Because I imagine it is a state issue, or is it a community, local
State,
issue?
yeah.
State. Well, it must come down through the school boards in each community
Right.
somehow.
Yeah.
To reach into the school areas that are in need. We have actually done some research in San Mateo County into some of the schools that are 88% Hispanic, and their rating is so low it is criminal.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to take that type of idea, how
Yeah.
do we get?
Yeah, no, it's-
to a community that's so blue, because
Yeah.
or they're not open to this kind of, but this is, of course, we could do advertising locally, who knows how.
Yeah, yeah.
But this is the kind of practical stuff that I'm looking to
Yeah,
get.
yeah.
And you have fundamentals there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I thank you. Yeah, look, of course, it's not going to be easy, and you're right. I mean, the politics in Arizona are different than the politics here in California. But I think this is why the work that you do is so important, because I think the more that we start showing that the ideas coming out of Sacramento when it comes to providing children with...
I can't do anything
Yeah.
because I don't have any fundamentals, which is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, yeah. And, so I would refer to you to the Education Savings Account, which I think can be a source to say, look, here's an example of a Western state that is implementing the idea of parents being empowered to choose for themselves where to send their children to school. And if you're talking to a Hispanic family and saying, look, Hispanic families in Arizona are benefiting from a program like this. You don't need to say it's a free market idea, but you and I know that's what it is. That's I think the raising the awareness that is going to be necessary in terms of getting more people mobilized and saying, look, things, just ask yourself, under this president, is the economy growing? Are your children getting a better education? You know the answer you're going to expect to hear from them is going to say, probably not. And so this is where we start referring to them and saying, look, here's an example of something that is proven to work, and it is actually providing Hispanic children, Latino children, with a better quality education. Yes, sir.
It's a question.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to edchoice.org, edchoice.org, it's called the Education Debit Card. What? Yeah.
The second question.
Yes, sir.
Once we read it and understand it,
Yeah.
how do we get in front of a Hispanic audience
Mm-hmm.
or get involved in Hispanic groups to bring our message? The problem that we have is I go to meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, all anybody ever does is preach to the choir.
Yeah.
I want to preach to the Hispanics. One of the reasons I'm here tonight, how do I get in front of a Hispanic group?
Yeah, absolutely. I know Paulo was going to get into that, but there's a lot of that. You can. Yeah. Yeah.
Give your lecture in their sleep.
Yeah. Okay. No.
Boring is to tears.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we've asked you multiple times.
Yeah. No. It's fine.
At some point, you really want to listen to us.
Yeah, I can name you a lot of organizations that are doing this kind of work that you could partner with. Paulo's going to get into this now. So, if there's any other questions? I'm sorry that I was yes.
So the green movement
Yeah.
What they're doing in Arizona?
Yes, yes ma'am. Yep, edchoice.org. Yep.
That's being successful in Arizona.
Yes, yes it is. Yep.
Thank you, Izzy. All right, so I want to start with this question. Is it Latino or Hispanic? How many of you have ever wondered that question? No one's ever wondered? How many of you think it's Latino? Raise your hand. How many of you think it's Hispanic? What you call Hispanics or Latinos in America?
I think it differs.
So when you ask U.S. Hispanics or U.S. Latinos what the proper terminology is, about 50% do not care whether you call them Latinos or Hispanic. Why is this important? Because it's really going to depend on the community where you live. So if 50% do not care whether you call them Hispanic or Latino, I fall under that category. You can call me Hispanic or Latino, it doesn't matter to me. I don't get offended. However, the 50% that do care, yes.
Please not stand, when you stand in the middle, you're blocking the entire screen.
Oh, well, I'm not even going to talk about that yet, so this is different. Once I get into that, I will not stand on the screen. Yes, so the 50% who do care, the word that they actually prefer is the terminology, the word Hispanic. So the word Hispanic was actually invented under the Nixon administration. It's a government made-up word. The origin of the word Hispanic comes from the Roman Empire, the part known as Spain today. Back then it was known as Hispania. The term was developed by U.S. Hispanics in order for the U.S. Census to properly count Latinos in the United States. So if the 50% who do care, and half of them care whether you call them Latinos or Hispanic, and they prefer Hispanic, the safest term to use is Hispanic. However, here in California, for example, when you use the word Hispanic, a lot of people think, oh, you're definitely a conservative because you're using the word Hispanic. It's Latino. The word is Latino. Latino simply is Spanish for Latin. So Latino in its purest definition includes French, Portuguese, Italians, Romanians, and Spaniards, and anyone who has any connection to those countries. Now, when you say Latin American, that's very different. Latin American obviously is individuals who come from any of the countries south of the border, Mexico and south. I want to share this with you because the perception that the Hispanic community, the Latino community has of conservatives is really, really interesting. A lot of people believe that Hispanics believe conservatives are outright hostile, right? Well, when you look at this was asked of Hispanics here in the US about Romney and Obama, the most recent presidential election. When they were asked whether Romney cared, didn't care, or was hostile towards their community, 14% of Latinos responded that Governor Romney cared about them. 56% of Latinos responded Governor Romney did not care about them. And interestingly enough, only 18% believed that the governor and the policies that he espoused were hostile to the Latino community. You look at Obama, 66% believed he cared, 23% believed he didn't care, and only 3% believed that he was hostile. Why is this important? Because oftentimes the problem that we have when trying to connect with the Latino community is that they believe we don't care. That we don't understand, we don't care about the issues that they care about, that there's a disconnection between conservative policies and what we say and how we'll benefit the Hispanic community. This is funny. If you were to replace, doing the same kind of polling, Romney with conservative, or if you were to replace Obama with liberal, the numbers shift a little bit, but for the most part stay the same. And what I believe is a great opportunity for conservatives is the fact that this number, which is the hostile number, 18, doesn't really increase that much when you put the word conservative. It only increases by 5% to 23%. So if our policies aren't hostile, then obviously the problem is a disconnect, that we are not proving to the Latino community that we care. Morton Blackwell, the president of the Leadership Institute, has a saying, politics is of the heart as well as of the mind. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And this is clearly with the Latino community. This is really interesting because you look at the electoral map and the way that it ended in 2012. We lost Nevada, Colorado, Florida, Virginia. U.S. Latinos account for about 10% of the U.S. electorate as it stood in the last presidential election. And the Republican, in this case, Mitt Romney, received about 23%. Had Mitt Romney received the same amount of percentage of Hispanics that George W. Bush did in 2004, he actually would have narrowly won the US presidential race. He would have carried Virginia, Florida, he would have carried Colorado, New Mexico, and he also would have carried Nevada. Now, if the US Hispanic population, as is projected to grow 10, 15 years from now, so that's what, 2 presidential elections, 3 presidential elections, to be 16% of the US electorate, and we don't change our stance at the national level, what I think is most telling about this particular map is that you have not only New Mexico becoming solidly blue, you have Virginia and Florida, Colorado and Nevada, considered important states to win at the national level, but you also have Texas. Texas will cease to be that conservative state that we often associate it with. So why do I share this information with you? Number one, the growth is happening and it's happening quickly. Number two, we're not keeping up with the growth. George W. Bush really did understood, and Jeb Bush does a really good job, and I'm going to show you clips of how these individuals, especially Jeb Bush, talks about education policy in a fashion that connects with Latinos. Excuse me. When you look at the growing audience, the Hispanic origin of your audience really, really does matter. So I know this is a little small, but I'm going to just go ahead and tell you what it says. It says among all Hispanic eligible voters nationwide, 59% are of Mexican descent. 2% are Salvadorian, and nearly 4 in 10, 38%, are from some other country. I fall into the category of nearly 4 out of 10 being from another country. I was born in Costa Rica. English is not my first language. In fact, it's my second. I didn't learn English until I moved to the States when I was about 10. Why is this important? Because when you're reaching the Hispanic community, we're not all Mexican. We're not all Costa Rican. We're not all Puerto Rican. We're not all Cuban. Our foods are different, our culture is different, our languages are actually a little different too. We may speak Spanish. I was just in Mexico City, and it was hilarious because I was dining with my host, two Mexicans, and we were sharing with each other the way that we like our desserts, and we have a dessert that's named the same thing, called cajeta. And we were trying to explain it to our American friend what a cajeta was, but we couldn't. So what did I do? I started explaining how it's made, how the cajeta is made. And they're looking at me and it's like, wait a second, that's not our cajeta. What are you talking about? That's not how you make it. And so there's even differences, even though we have desserts that are named the same, are completely different. And recognizing that on the front end is very important. When I first moved to the United States, everyone either assumed I was Puerto Rican or Mexican. And to anyone who is not Puerto Rican or Mexican, it's almost telling, well, why are you calling me something that I'm not? Puerto Rico is an island. It's a U.S. territory. They're American citizens. I'm from a sovereign country with a sovereign government. And so it's very important. Izzy is from Mexico, so his heritage and his story is going to be kind of different than my story. There is a lot that unites the Latino community, and this is essentially what we're going to talk about with segmentation, acculturation levels, and the diversity within the communities. You look at California alone, and California specifically has a very large Hispanic population. The origin, get that water. Thank you. I've been recovering from being sick. There's a few things I discovered out in DC just recently. Again, from Costa Rica, tropical. Southern California, nice weather. Number one, I thought that single digits in a thermometer were only inside a refrigerator. Number two, I did not know it was possible for a door to freeze with a sheet of ice that you couldn't get into it. So I've been miserable in Washington, D.C. Too cold for me.
Come out and talk to us again.
What was that?
Come out again.
Right? So this is really important because the Hispanic origin of California is not a mirror of Hispanic origin nationwide. If I were talking, for example, in Miami, the primary audience in Miami would be Cuban. So the Cuban experience is very different than this experience of a Mexicano, whose immigrant story will vary very differently. So in California, 8 in 10, so 81% of California Hispanics are of Mexican origin. 40% are Salvadorian and 15% claim other. There's these three topics: acculturation, segmentation, and diversity. Can someone tell me what they think acculturation means? All right, you're a bunch of rowdy conservatives who are just getting up in arms, and now no one wants to volunteer and tell me what they think acculturation means. Come on, all right, yes, sir.
Learning English.
Learning in English, okay, that's one.
It's adapting.
That's one part of acculturation, yes.
It's adapting to the culture.
Okay, adapting. Adapting to the culture. So adaptation and acculturation are almost synonymous. The word that is used more academically is acculturation, because it's the adaptation of someone who comes from somewhere else and essentially becomes accultured to that country that they now belong to. Segmentation. Can someone tell me segmentation within the Hispanic community, what that means?
Legals versus illegals.
Nope.
Separation of the origin.
Nope.
Different Hispanics from different cultures.
You're getting closer?
Maintaining their heritage.
Not quite.
It's ghettoized, basically.
Nope. Segmentation within the Hispanic community means, so if let's say you guys like to play, I like volleyball, for example. It's actually grouping people by their likes, by similarities. So we have Republican women's clubs, right? That's segmentation within the Republican Party, Republican women's groups. We have, black conservatives. Why is segmentation important for the Hispanic community? Because sometimes a Latina can better address the concerns of other Latinas than, say, a Latino. So, and then next is diversity. We kind of touched on that a little bit, and understanding the makeup of how diverse the community is and how important. Yes, sir.
What's the difference between acculturation and assimilation?
There's just different terminology. Assimilation is almost, acculturation is adapting to the culture without forgetting. So for example, myself. And I'm going to give you 3 different kinds of acculturation. We're going to talk about that here in a moment. But if you look at assimilation, usually means further down the line when people have completely removed all semblance of their previous connection to the home country, right? You've completely assimilated into that culture. Acculturation is the adopting of someone else's culture as your own without necessarily forgetting your own culture. Does that make sense?
Assimilation does not mean that you forget your own culture.
No, when you've assimilated, assimilation, when it's gone through 3rd, 4th, 5th generation, it means that there's hardly any connection to that home country.
What means you become integrated in part, I teach this stuff, you become integrated in part of the culture in which you're living, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you forget your own language, your own food.
That's what acculturation is.
Acculturation is the beginning stages of it coming into a community and adapting to it.
No. So there's 3 different kinds of acculturations. How many of you have Facebook? All right, so there's a few of you who don't have Facebook. The way I like to illustrate acculturation and why it's important to understand acculturation when reaching the Latino community is because the message for different acculturation levels will be very different. So I'm going to give you example number 1 of a Facebook profile. I like visuals. So we have Facebook profile number 1, and we're going to choose, his name is going to be Juan. Juan Mendez is going to be Facebook profile number 1. And Juan Mendez, on his page, his Facebook statuses are going to be predominantly in Spanish, if not 99% in Spanish. You know how on Facebook you have different things that you can like, right? So he's going to like boxers from, we're going to say his home country is Mexico. He's going to like boxers from Mexico. He's going to like the Mexican soccer team, right, on Facebook. His statuses are going to be about how, let's say, for example, Mexico beat Australia in order to qualify for the FIFA World Cup, right? And it's all going to be in Spanish. But this individual, Juan Mendez, is now living in the United States, and his acculturation level isn't as high as, say, person number 2. And we're going to say person number 2, his name is Paulo, okay? So Paulo's Facebook status and Paulo's Facebook page doesn't look exactly as Juan's Facebook page. Paulo's Facebook page is very different because his acculturation level is very different. Paulo speaks English. He graduated from an English university here in the United States. He's very well assimilated, accultured into American politics, American culture. So you'll see Paulo post about Justin Bieber get arrested, down in Miami. You'll see Paulo post in English, but occasionally you'll see Paulo posting in Spanish. Paulo likes what? The Costa Rican national soccer team. So he still has connections to his home country. Understanding the acculturation level for Paulo and how you reach Paulo is going to be very different than how you reach Juan. Because Paulo is an American through and through. But Paulo still has a lot of family in Costa Rica. And so what happens in Costa Rica? You better believe he cares about what happens in Costa Rica. What the government is doing? Oh, you better believe he cares about that. And you can see that as evidence on his Facebook statuses that he posts. Whether it's an article from the national newspaper of his home country. But you also see how well accultured he is within American circles, that you could say 80% of what he does through Facebook has to do with American culture. So then you have person number 3. And we're going to name this individual Priscilla. Priscilla Martinez. So Priscilla Martinez's Facebook page is going to be very, very different than than Paulo's. Why? Because Priscilla is not recently moved into the United States. Priscilla, in fact, knows no Spanish whatsoever. So her Facebook statuses, none of them are in Spanish. In fact, all she likes on Facebook are people like Mariah Carey, are people like Beyonce. Her Facebook statuses are more about pop culture than politics. Priscilla essentially is a second or a third or a fourth generation U.S. Hispanic. Now, when you ask Priscilla, what are you? Priscilla will say, I'm an American. When you ask Priscilla and you prod a little more, well, what's your heritage? Oh, I'm of Mexican heritage. You ask Paulo, where are you from? If Paulo's not in California, he'll say, I'm from California. But if you ask Paulo, no, like, where are you from? Paulo will proudly say, I'm actually 100% Costa Rican. Do I consider myself an American? Absolutely. I think being an American is a choice. It's subscribing to ideals, subscribing to what made this country great. You ask Juan, where are you from? He may be living in California or he may be living in Texas, but he's not going to say Texas or he's not going to say California. He's going to say, I'm from Mexico. Because the roots that he has, the connection that he has, are still very, very recent and very, very strong. So the acculturation level is extremely important in how you develop your message. Because if you're trying to reach Priscilla, you're going to reach Priscilla with the things that Priscilla cares about. The things that are immediately in her circle, which tend to be very, if you will, quote-unquote, American, as we describe it. If you're trying to reach Paulo as a Latino, remember that's what we're trying to do, trying to learn how to reach out to Latino. If you're trying to reach that segment, or that acculturation that's like Paulo as a Latino, you have to appeal to Paulo's history, because he's a proud Costa Rican. And you have to respect Paulo's history and understand Paulo's history, not be dismissive about it. But at the same time also understand that Paulo loves America and loves it very much. One time we were in Texas and someone tried to ask a trick question. If the United States men's soccer team was playing against the Costa Rican men's soccer team, who would you root for? And it was an individual who was trying to be a little feisty and wanted to test my loyalty to the United States. And I said, I thought to myself, what a cheap question. Because the simple answer is, I would root for the Costa Rican team. And he wouldn't allow me to explain why, if I would have answered that. He wouldn't allow me to explain that I remember growing up with my grandfather, sitting on his lap, yelling at the television, my grandma's voice going out, as she would yell in Spanish, rooting for, as we call it, la Cele. He wouldn't understand that, and he wouldn't have even listened to the explanation why. I have fond memories of rooting for the Costa Rican men's soccer team. I don't have that with the US men's soccer team. So what may seem on the surface like a test of my loyalty was really a question that's deeper. He didn't respect the fact that I have a history with my home country. And so he was trying to be dismissive about it, and immediately, were not me, a self-described conservative already, he would have lost Paulo as a voter. Everyone with me so far? Everyone get me? Okay, I see one thumb up. At least I didn't get that one finger salute that Ronald Reagan got, right? So now, with Juan as a voter, right, recognizing Juan's heritage as a voter is going to be even far more important than recognizing Paulo's heritage as a voter. Now, Priscilla, to her, it's almost second nature. Yeah, I'm of Mexican descent, or not second nature, excuse me, that's almost like an afterthought. Yeah, I'm of Mexican descent, but she's so American that it's an afterthought for her. Now, segmentation. Why is segmentation important? Once you understand the different acculturations with the segmentation, is because Latinas in general love to get together and love to talk about things and share things, just like, quite frankly, I would say, most women like to do. And so if you're trying to reach Latinas, a good way to do it is to go through the Latina get-togethers, the homes, etc., and the house parties, the not really tea, son café con leche, so coffee with milk. That's the way that you would reach Latinas. If you're trying to reach, for example, Hispanics of faith, right? Then you would go through the people that are the community leaders in the faith community, the pastor, the priest. Why? Because there's a reverence, there's a respect for these community leaders within the Hispanic community. And so going through them and trying to reach that community, whether it's the faith community, that segmentation makes it very important. A lot of people don't like when we say segmentation because you're just playing identity politics. You're being like the Democrats playing identity politics. How many of you feel like that? 2? 3? Someone not being honest with me? Segmentation. A lot of conservatives don't like segmentation because they feel they're playing like racial politics or gender politics. But segmentation is essentially just a smart way of reaching voters.
It's a marketing term.
It's marketing, exactly. One of the most brilliant marketing ploys I ever saw was when the toy companies switched from marketing to parents to buy their children toy to marketing to children. And who wants a nagging child saying, "Can you buy me that toy? I want that toy, can you please?" And what happened? The increase in spending for toys actually went up when they started targeting children. So it's all about marketing, how we go about it. Now, yes, sir?
Of all your research in segmentation and so on, how many Latinos, Hispanic, whatever, are...
Well, don't say whatever. That seems dismissive.
No, it's for Americans. Okay, how they want us to call them, that's another issue. But my point is, how many of them are fourth generation, fifth generation? I mean, the 1848 war was settled to protect the rights of the Spanish speakers in California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Nevada. Why? Because this was 170 years ago, 160 years ago. So we broke the treaty to send the England from. But the question is, how many are first generation, legal or illegal, because your kids are born here, your kids are citizens, second generation, third generation. You go to the Mission District in San Francisco, and you can tell the generation by the Spanish on the sign of the store. Which is Spanish to first. Second generation is mixed, but the third generation is formerly known as. Because the kids don't speak Spanish, the grandkids. The abuelitos in East LA want English ESL classes because they can't talk to their own grandchildren.
So my pastor used to say something that I think was, and I think you've essentially answered your own question. My pastor used to say, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can do twice the listening, half the talking. So when we put our ear to the ground, and when we are in the communities, and as you noted, you will note the sign is in Spanish, so what does it mean? They're likely more like Juan than they are like Priscilla. They're a acculturation level in that particular community. So they're probably more first generation. I think New Mexico is a perfect example. The state of New Mexico, I used to work in New Mexico, I was a Hispanic outreach director there, is a perfect example of the mixture of US Latinos throughout the entire United States. Why? Because you look at the northern part of New Mexico, and you have Latinos who'd been in the country before the state was even a state of the Union. And these Latinos don't speak a lick of Spanish. And you speak to them in Spanish and they will get offended. Because just because my surname says Martinez, you think I speak Spanish? So the acculturation level of those particular Latinos in northern New Mexico, and even calling them Latinos, is offensive.
Mostly because large numbers of them are actually Jews. That's another story. So the thing is, if you're talking about segmentation, how to reach them, who do you want to reach? The second generation?
Mm-hmm. So this is
the third generation,
yes.
Political patterns are fixed in the family.
Okay, so this herein lies the key, and now we're getting ahead of the presentation. We will get there. We will get there. So who should you target? Should you target, his question was first generation, second generation, third generation? Well, first and foremost, I believe that our message reaches everyone, and we shouldn't leave any chips on the table, first and foremost. But then, of course, there's the smart political answer as to who we go about, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So, now, there is a natural tendency within the Hispanic community to be very loyal. And I think this is fascinating. When we were doing the research, how it really played out in families that I know, including my own. And so in order for really reach the Latino community, you have to tap into that unrivaled loyalty, right? And what is that unrivaled loyalty? Essentially being consistent in recognizing and understanding, as it says up there, the adaptation levels, those acculturation levels, and then you'll be able to do it. Toyota does a fantastic job. Toyota as a company does a fantastic job. Why does Toyota do a fantastic job? Because I want to play this clip of Toyota. And then I'm going to ask you your take on the clip. And what you think. It's in Spanish. Do we have any Spanish-speaking folks here? Oh, great. You'll be able to pick up on things based on just visual alone.
Y este camionetón, regalo a mi papá, las niñas, 170.
Oops. Excuse me.
Y este camionetón, regalo a mi papá, las niñas, 170.
219.914. Somos muchos colombianos, somos muchos Toyota. Una belleza. Somos muchos colombianos, somos muchos Toyota. Una belleza. Yo conté acá 8 años. Mi papá lo ha cuidado, me lo pasó a mí ahora. Y yo cargo el mismo sueño de él. Mi papá lo ha cuidado, me lo pasó a mí ahora. Y yo cargo el mismo sueño de él.
Show him. I want to hear answers. What did you visually pick up if you don't speak Spanish? What was that? They're trying to sell cars. Yes, but how do they go about selling cars? Okay, so the unifying theme is the car. No matter where you're what? What did you say?
Wherever you're from, the Dominican Republic, or wherever you were from, Mexico.
Colombian, I think, was one. Yes?
If you want long-lasting coolness, buy a Toyota.
If you want long-lasting coolness, buy a Toyota. What is fascinating is that they essentially tapped into that Toyota. This is hilarious because when I say it's played out in my family, it really is fascinating. First car my father bought when he moved to the States was a Toyota. That Toyota was a Toyota Corolla, 1997, brand new at the time. It had not 200,000 miles, but it came very close to it. The car passed away late last year. Okay? We had to put it to rest. And what vehicle do you think my parents went to buy again? Oh, you better believe they went to go buy a Toyota. Because Toyota built that long-lasting relationship with my parents as a consumer. And you can say politics is about really consumer. We got policies. We want people to buy into those policies. We want people to buy into the party, into the movement. And so Toyota was able to tap that unrivaled loyalty, and here comes where I get tongue-tied because English is not my first language. She said she gets tongue-tied too, and it's her first language. One of the problems I always have is I always try to use, and I'm forgetting the terminology, but I call them Americanisms. They're like, go kick the bucket, or Not slang. Colloquialisms, thank you. And I just always kill them. Like, it's not go kick the bucket, is right? What is it? Kick the bucket is if you die, right? Okay, what it's, kick the can, or... So I always mess those up, so I don't even know why attempt. Long story short, they were able to tap into passion points. They tapped into those passion points and built that very strong relationship. In this particular ad, what Toyota did is recognized, remember the three that we talked about? It recognized and respected the acculturation level of the Latinos that they were targeting, right? But they also recognized the diversity of those Latinos. And some of you said it's about building, it's really selling cars. What they were selling was actually not the car. What they were selling was the story behind the car. And that's what made this particular ad so powerful. It recognized that not all Latinos come from the same country. And it recognized that family, if you noticed, those that speak Spanish, those of you who speak Spanish, raise your hand again. Did you notice how family was a central theme in that particular ad? The gentleman, and I want to play it again, and I'll pause it as he speaks.
Also, they had subtitles, so probably dialect.
So, sorry. Here, I want to pause here. I don't know if any of you caught this, but it said, somos muchos bolivianos. That means we are Bolivian. We are Dominican. We're Salvadorian. We are Colombians. I don't even know what Beliceños from Belize. Hondureños, Brasileiros, Venezolanos. So this is powerful because their campaign is Somos. The main tagline is Somos muchos Latinos. We are many Latinos, would be the literal translation. But within that, there's the subplot, which is recognizing all these bunch of different communities that make up what people consider Latinos. So they're recognizing the diversity within the community. Oh, what did I just do? All right. So, no, I think it might be from... So he said, this truck was given to me by who? My father. How many miles? I think he said close to 180,000 miles. So let's continue. This guy says 219,000 miles. So now what are they doing? They're panning to old cars, old Toyotas. Someone said they're trying to sell a car. If they're trying to sell a car, they wouldn't be showing old, beat up 219,000, mile cars. They'd be showing that new sexy Toyota Tacoma or that new sexy Toyota Corolla, right?
Somos muchos colombianos. Somos muchos Toyota.
It's beautiful. It's talking about the car. Dice, this belonged to my dad. My dad passed it on to me. Now I carry on the same dream. Is what he said. So a car is not about wheels and rubber and metal. It represents something more for that family. Yes?
There's a very interesting commercial that is an interesting analogy to this, Chevy from Steve. They show this guy with his dad and has the old Chevy pickup, and this guy can't buy anything else but a Chevy. Different, but this is the same type of market.
Yeah, so it's extremely fascinating because now you're appealing to what? History, the family history, the connection with the family. And when we say family is central to Latinos, there's a reason why our primos are not called primos, but they're called brothers and sisters, even though they're cousins. So that what I just said, there's a reason why cousins are essentially called brothers and sisters in Latino communities. It's because when we say blood is thicker than anything, we really, really mean it. I mean, our family better... Remember, I was in New York one time and my mom simply asked, maybe the problem is that we were in New York City, but she asked, where's the restroom? And the lady was absolutely rude to her. And she might as well have been rude to me. Because she was rude to my mom, that translated to being rude to me. And I told the lady, you know what, there's a perception of New Yorkers out there, and you're exactly that perception. Rude and not even welcoming to others who are visiting your city. Because she went after my mom. I'm like, no, you don't go after my mom. And it's fascinating how they were able to tap into one of those passion points, and that passion point in this particular instance with Toyota was family. So, what are the other passion points? Food, sports, family, music, and beauty. When you look at polling and the Latino community, when it comes to social issues, there is a change. But when you look at it, Latinos are pro-life, Latinos support traditional marriage, and just like the general American population though, when you look at younger Latinos, there is a shift when it comes to the marriage issue. And that's because of the acculturation level that's going on and the underpinnings of American culture and the pressure of American culture. But if you look at the acculturation level of, say, Juan or someone like Paulo, their steadfast belief in these social issues tends to be a lot stronger than someone's acculturation level like Priscilla, who is easily swayed by American culture far more than would be Juan or Paulo. Food is really important in our cultures. As I noted when I was in Mexico City and we were having this discussion about our desserts, even though we were talking about two completely different desserts and we thought we were talking about the same dessert, food is really central. My sister just gave birth to her second little girl, my niece, and I got to meet her on my last leg before I came up here. They're in Southern California. My great aunt, my aunt, my grandma, and my cousin came to witness the birth of my niece. So they've been here, they leave tomorrow. They go back to Costa Rica. I'm sorry, but I don't know a lot of families who would send 4 of their delegates, if you will, to witness the birth of a niece, in this case the great-granddaughter, niece, great-grandniece, cousin, and what is my aunt to my niece? I don't even know. Anyway, it was fascinating. What were we doing this morning? We were all sitting at the table. We were all preparing breakfast. My aunt prepared the fruit and chopped it up and did the yogurt and the almonds and the nuts. My grandma was out there whisking the egg. My dad was preparing the hash browns. It is a family affair. Food is a family affair in a lot of Latino cultures. It isn't something you do. You come and you sit down for 15 minutes and then you leave. Oh no. Our breakfast was a good hour and a half. It was a good hour and a half. It was fantastic because I miss my grandma's scrambled eggs. She told me the recipe. I still can't make them. Thank God I was able to see her because I came happy on that flight. But it's a family affair. Food brings the families together. When you look at any kind of get-together with Latinos, you better believe there's always going to be a lot of food. It's just central to our culture. It's one of our passion points. Music. I remember one time, I worked in the legislature in California for a senator, and then I worked for an assembly member. Yes, there were good conservatives. It certainly wasn't, who's someone from this area? Who was that? No, it wasn't Mark Leno or Tom Amiano. You guys know who they are? No? Anyone? Bueller? No? Okay, so I hate when jokes fall flat. Anyway, so I worked for two good legislators, and what was fascinating about one of my coworkers is I would play some music, and it could be samba, merengue, it could be salsa, whatever it was, some sort of music from Latin America. and she goes and she says, "Oh, that sounds like circus music." And I remember looking at her, it's like, oh no, she did not just say that my music sounds like circus music. That is not cool. Okay, that is not cool. And so our music is very vibrant, and I think it showcases the passion of the Hispanic community, but at the same time, it is very diverse. So you have music that can be from Argentina, music that can be from the Caribbean, music that can be from different regions of even within Mexico. And so even that music is different within all the regions. So if you're trying to throw a get-together and you're trying to invite Latinos and you said it's Mariachi Cinco de Mayo, that could go wrong. Why? Because it doesn't necessarily mean that all Latinos like mariachi. It doesn't necessarily mean that all Latinos know how to dance salsa. In fact, I remember there was a very accultured liberal Democrat friend of mine who worked for a liberal Democrat in the legislature in California and says to me, "Paulo, you're not a Latino." And I'm like, "What do you mean you're not a Latino? You're a conservative," she told me. And I was like, "Oh, whoa, what do you mean?" She is a self-described Latina. She didn't speak English. And I said, "You know, I take a little offense to that. You're calling me a non-Latino or a traitor to being Latino simply because I espouse conservative values." And I said, "Let me tell you who the true Latino is in this particular case. I know how to dance the music. I know how to speak the language. I know how to prepare the food. I understand the culture. You don't know either. So by definition, you tell me who the true Latino in this particular instance is." So there is, within music, a big variety and difference, and understanding even that will make you even more attuned. Next you have sports. So someone like Juan, his acculturation level, you better believe soccer is important, and even someone like Paulo, soccer is important. But you have someone like Priscilla, she could care less. In fact, she cares about the other football, American football. That's what she would care about, because she's a reflection of the culture around her, correct? And last but not least, beauty. One of the things that I always find fascinating, if you ever have a chance to just tune into Univision or Telemundo, you don't have to understand what they're saying, but you look at the commercials, especially the commercials that are geared towards women, it's all about beauty. It's all about beauty. So you say, well, that's a superficial culture. It's not a superficial culture. It's about being presentable when you go and you meet others. And so beauty plays a huge role, especially when you're trying to reach Latinas. Yes, I see a hand up.
I think there's one up there you don't have it. You mentioned it earlier when you said that they look up to the faith leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in this area, whenever you read about one of the demonstrations or the rallies that take place, they start at some church,
Mm-hmm.
and the priest is at the Catholic church. And the priest is out there spouting, his ideology. And they look up to that, and like you just shared that story where that lady said, "You're not a Latino because you're conservative," because the Catholic Church in particular is pushing the whole social justice ideology to their congregations. So right off the bat, you're kind of behind the eight ball on how we address countering the religious leaders' ideology statements without offending the Catholic faith. I'm not Catholic, but I would be on my equal.
Yeah. How do you address that in a political context? I think this is fascinating. How many of you have heard of Wendy Davis? All right, I expected a lot of you would know. Do you know what she just said recently in Texas? She's running for governor of Texas against Greg Abbott. Do you know what she just said?
Which thing?
Well, she said a lot of outrageous things, but one thing that really makes you scratch your head is like, really, you really are what you just said you are? Yes, sir.
She's willing to carry a gun.
She's willing to carry a gun. No, not quite that one. She said she was pro-life. Did you guys hear about that? Wendy Davis, the one that stood for 13 hours promoting abortion in the Texas legislature, said she was pro-life. And she went to explain why she was pro-life. The reason why I say this, sir, is because sometimes, and we're jumping ahead and I will get to this eventually, is that when we discuss things, when we say things, as you have all noted already, we tend to preach to the choir. So the words that we use are the words that we use when we're preaching to the choir. And that doesn't connect and translate. So when we say free market capitalism, oh, you best believe a conservative knows what free market capitalism is. But it won't necessarily translate to the audience you're trying to reach. I reference the Bible again. I look to Paul. When Paul spoke to the Greeks, he spoke like a Greek. When Paul spoke to the Jews, he spoke like a Jew. And so what we have to do, we don't necessarily have to speak Spanish, but it's good if we have someone who is able to articulate conservatism in Spanish, and I think it should be encouraged. But we should be able to address issues in a way that it clicks in our audience's mind. So, this is a perfect slide. And I know this over here is meant to be small because it's what we call a word cluster or a word cloud. When you ask someone, when I say California, what is your first thought? Liberal. One word. When I say Texas, what is your first thought?
Conservative.
Conservative. When I say Obama, what is your first thought? I can get in trouble here. Obamacare. All right, I asked the right person. No, when I say Hillary Clinton, what do you think?
I don't want to say it.
He says, I'm in polite company. I appreciate that, sir. When I say John McCain, what do you think? Old. When I say Paulo Sabaha, you all think young, handsome, and the future of the Republican Party, right? Well, anyway, a word cluster, essentially what it is you ask individuals to think of the first word or sentence or phrase that they associate with the phrase that someone else is telling them. So we have up here what it means among white people is essentially what it means, what they associate. The word is social and cultural issues. So when you're talking about social and cultural issues, what do white people think? The biggest one is gay rights and gay marriage. Okay? So that means if you're talking to someone who is white, most of the time when you're talking about social issues, that's going to be the discussion, right? When you ask what it means amongst conservatives, it almost kind of resembles the white population overall. Gay rights, gay marriage is a big one. But when you ask Hispanics what social and cultural issues mean to them, this is where there's the disconnect. To them, it means cultural differences is the biggest one. So who would that be? That would be the acculturation that falls under Juan and Paulo and on that spectrum. But you see gay rights, gay marriage actually has a strong showing. So who would that be? That would be Priscilla. The ones that are so acculturated into America that for them, it's essentially reflective of the overall general public. Everyone with me so far? You see cultural differences, you see tolerance, respect, as perhaps the second tide to gay rights, and you see values and traditions. Now values and traditions are what? The values and traditions, what are those Hispanics we're referring to? Those are the traditions of their culture, of their families, of their heritage. So it isn't necessarily that when we say values, we usually think, oh, it means traditional marriage, right? It means it has a conservative bent. So why am I sharing this with you? Is because it's important. We're so used to, if you will, quote unquote, preaching to the choir, that the terminology that we're even using has a negative effect on us. Because I'm saying blue and they're hearing red. I'm saying red and people are hearing blue. So even our language, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's a language barrier, someone not able to understand English. It just means that the definition that we have chosen to assign to whatever words and phrases you're using when you're talking about free market or when you're talking about capitalism, well, capitalism has a very negative connotation in a lot of Latin American countries. And so when Izzy was talking about economic freedom and economic opportunity, you better believe that makes people think twice about it. Ooh, economic opportunity. Well, that's the reason why many came to the United States. That's the reason why a lot of people come to the United States, because they want economic opportunity. So that will resonate more than capitalism. Yes, ma'am?
So you're telling me that the softening of an approach when you're using terminology would be cultural differences rather than this what we would call social issues. Like the approaches are the cultural differences, that there are less cultural differences between us. Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that when we're talking about social and cultural issues like gay marriage, abortion, and all of that, when we're using the terminology, like I'm for family, let me give you a perfect example. How many of you heard of Steve King, congressman from Iowa? Do you remember what he said recently that really got him into a lot of trouble?
Yes.
He said immigrants, and he was, and this is the thing too, it's misguided, but the word immigrant is almost synonymous to the word Hispanic or Latino in the United States. When someone says immigrant, people automatically assume it's Hispanics that you're talking about. And so it's really, really interesting. So when Steve King was talking about immigrants, and then he of course makes the reference to our southern neighbor, then you immediately, that association is even made stronger. But he said they have this, calves the size of cantaloupes because they're hauling drugs over the border from Mexico into the United States. That's what Steve King said. So, you better believe that clip, by the way, was played on Univision and Telemundo over and over and over and over again. So when a person who also is a self-described Republican or affiliates with the Republican Party, right? And you have someone like Steve King who's from a district that represents no Hispanics whatsoever, so he doesn't have a Hispanic problem, the way, say, the Republican Party in California has a Hispanic problem, correct? He doesn't understand because he doesn't need to cater or he doesn't need to engage the Hispanic community in order to get elected. So he gets away with saying something like that and gets reelected. But the dynamic in California is very different. So when Steve King, who professes to be a Republican, belongs to the Republican Party, says that, and then Paulo Cepaja gets up to a group full of Latinos and says, I'm a Republican, what do you think the audience is going to think? Oh, he thinks I have calves the size of watermelon because I'm hauling drugs across the border.
That's the free market. There must be someone to buy it.
The free market, there must be someone to buy it, he says. Sir, I like you. You're funny. So, and I mean that with the most respect. I like that kind of wit. So, why am I telling you this? Is because when a conservative gets up and says, you know, the Hispanic community and conservatives, we share those family values. We share family values. And well, a Hispanic is thinking cultural differences. You celebrate cultural differences? When did you last celebrate cultural differences? What are you talking about, sharing family values? You're saying we share family values and that the family is the most important and central to the development of a society and that we place in, you know, and that brothers and sisters, that's what you're saying. But what they're hearing is, no, I don't see you know, tolerance and respect, because last I remember was Steve King saying size of cantaloupes. Does everyone get how what we say and sometimes the association is lost in translation? Yes, sir.
Are you saying that in the Latino community, there's a lot of value on celebrating cultural differences?
Absolutely.
Okay, because that's news to me.
We absolutely. That's why Toyota recognized that there's Dominicans, that there's Brazilians,
cultural differences within the Latino community,
and in general. And in general.
All right, I'm just telling you right out, I'm not aware of that, because within the Latino community, I'm aware of that. But I'm certainly not aware of the typical Latino celebrating other cultures other than Latino culture. And that maybe that's just me, and maybe I belong in Iowa, but that's been my experience.
Okay, so I misunderstood the second part, or didn't quite catch the second part. You said...
Part about Iowa?
No, what you said... you said you understand Latinos celebrating differences in cultures within Latinos, but not...
But not other cultures outside the Latino community.
What do you mean by that?
Well, meaning that they're going to celebrate, and I'm generalizing like hell, but that's what I'm here for. You know, they'll celebrate the Cinco de Mayo, but not the 4th of July.
Oh, no. Well, no, you find a lot of patriotic... You know, Latinos serve in the military at a higher rate than their proportion to the U.S. population.
And I'm talking about the group that we're trying to reach.
Mm-hmm. So, no, you better believe, because they appreciate cultural differences, it doesn't mean that they don't partake in a different culture. You better, every 4th of July, we were out there with fireworks and celebrating and singing the national anthem and American, you know, beautiful songs and the fireworks. It's a family affair. No, by celebrating cultural differences, it doesn't mean that you don't partake in other cultures that are different like yours. That's where the tolerance and respect part comes in, where well, I respect your culture, or, you know, I tolerate your culture. If your practice is to take my shoes off, I will take my shoes off because I respect and that's the way that you do it in you know, in your culture. Yes, sir.
If Republican and conservative being stigma, how do you get through that? Because that's what we're trying to sell them to do. They vote conservative or vote for Republican.
Yeah.
And
how do we get rid of that? So conservative Republican is what you said. It automatically puts us behind the 8 ball. How do we get beyond that? Is your question. So remember when I talked about the polling cares, doesn't care, believe is hostile. If that number hostile, which was at 18 in a Romney versus Obama, it's about 23 in a conservative versus liberal. If the number were larger, we would have a lot bigger problems. But the number that matters most in that particular instance is the percentage who believe conservatives do not care. So the step number one is proving that we care. There's this thing that's called servant leadership, and I'm getting a little ahead, but that's a little preview into what we're going to talk about. Yes, sir.
Hi, don't want to hijack the conversation too much, but is there a way that we can, like, I don't know, write angry letters or something to the RNC, the censor, Steve King, those kind of comments, they're just killing us out here.
I was thinking about shooting you, Frank.
Yeah.
They're just killing us.
Yeah.
How do we?
Well, you know, quite frankly, you know, one of the things that I don't like is that California is the ATM machine for everyone else running for office except in California, right? So all the presidential candidates, everyone running for U.S. Senate in another state comes to California to fundraise.
Yeah.
So that really ticks me off because I think we need to start investing in the Golden State, the state that after all did give us Ronald Reagan, who just turned 103 a few days ago. So I think that obviously we have to start putting a little meat we need to start investing in our own state and doing so. That's one. Now how do we do with the RNC? I used to work for the RNC. I'm not speaking tonight on behalf of the RNC. That is not my role. The role of the RNC typically is to be the ground operation to turn out the vote on election day. So a lot of people have turned to the RNC as the messenger. You need to become the messenger, and you need to, you know, censor Steve King, or you need to, you know, whatever. What I would recommend outside of my role of the Leadership Institute is to get involved in your local party, whether it be the Republican Party, Libertarian Party, whatever party, and start from the local level to really kind of change things. Get elected, become a delegate. You know, one thing I will say, my personal opinion, is that Reince Priebus, I think, gets it. Now, what initiatives they're trying to put on, I mean, I think it's yet to be seen whether it will be effective or not. But I cannot imagine, as independent-minded as conservatives are, if someone were to come to any one of us, let alone the head of a political party, telling us, you need to stop saying that, the way that someone would react from our movement. So it makes it really hard, I think, and that's where we have to really, someone said it beautifully, we have to build a brand of conservatism that is stronger in this state of California, that is stronger in the minds of Latino voters than the national brand of conservative. When we do that, and the brand of conservatism in the state of California is stronger, then it doesn't matter what the others say, because your Latino friends will say, well, I know that individual, and in California, they're not like the Steve Kings of the world.
So could this be like the Tea Party movement of California to be more open to the Hispanic vote, be more receptive, and that sort of thing?
I think it takes everyone. Everyone in the conservative movement, not just the Tea Party, everyone in the conservative movement. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so the question that did everyone hear what she said? Everyone? Okay, essentially what she was saying, since family is so central to the Latino community, if we lose a generation, wouldn't their children then become reliable voters for the other party? I think this is a perfect example of what happened in New Mexico, in the northern region of New Mexico. That everyone over there just votes party ticket because their family voted party ticket. But what's unique about that is that you find it not only in Latino communities, you find it across all other communities. So what do we do to combat that? We go and we pick the low-hanging fruit. The individuals who have no party affiliation, the individuals who don't believe they're this or they're that, And then, you know, perfect example of this was I had this dear friend of mine. She was this black lady. Her and I would always have conversations, and I'm like, oh my gosh, if she would just listen to herself, she's saying all these conservative things. So one day we just went and had coffee, and we had a good conversation. And she did not agree to become a member of the party that I belong to, but she ended up saying, okay, fine, I'm no longer a member of the other party, I'm going to be a declined state. And I said, well, that's a step in the right direction, I'll take it. She was halfway there. And so it's going to take this interaction, constant interaction with a kind face.